Hey, it's Heath Mullikin with ChaseYourLine.com. I'm here with Mark Wilson, who is, I just met for the first time a few minutes ago. He is actually one of my heroes because he is a pastor at a rural church in Wisconsin that is growing, that's doing great things. But he's also been in blogging for a really long time and has a blog that is very well read all over the world and has a lot of connections. And I just, Mark, just thank you for. It's just great that you were in town, and appreciate you giving me the time. How long have you been there at Hayward?
Well, I've been there 19 years. I'm on my 20th now.
Wow.
So in August, it'll be the 2 decades.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, a long time.
Now, what were you doing before you went there? What type of ministry have you been involved in?
I was a youth pastor, yeah. And really, you know, by switching from being a youth pastor to a senior pastor, it's just the youth are bigger. There's all,
yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, you did that too.
That's
right?
exactly
so
right.
Youth to adult, they're just grown-up teenagers.
You're on your 20th year, and I'm on my 12th week, so I got a ways to go. Tell us just a little bit about your community. I know you're in a rural community, but what has your church done? You know, your blog is Revitalize Your Church. What has your church done? What have you done to revitalize your church and also revitalize your community there?
Yeah. Well, thanks. Really, our church was almost ready to die.
Wow.
In fact, there were some weeks where there were less than 10 people. But my predecessor came in and saved the day.
Wow.
He really did. He was 65 years old. He could have retired. He'd actually bought an apple orchard, and he thought he was going to go take care of apples, which is a whole lot easier than taking care of people.
Right.
But what he did was he heard about this little church that was his home church where he grew up in. His parents were charter members of it, and he didn't want to see it die.
Wow.
So he re-enlisted for 4 more years. It was really the last 4 good years that he had. I mean, really, his health broke down after that.
Yeah.
But he gave those 4 years, and he turned it into a strong, small congregation.
Right.
So by the time I got there, it was ready to go.
Wow.
If I would have gone when he did, everything would have just fallen apart.
Right.
But because he laid the foundation, when I came in, then it was not like he dressed them in tracksuits.
Yeah.
And he put them on the starting line.
Yeah.
And he handed me a gun, and he said, "Shoot!"
Yeah.
And I did, and they took off. And so that was it. I think that he had 2 young men that he invested in.
Right.
And those 2 young men became my partners. Now, they're not so young anymore.
Right.
We're all a bunch of old geezers now. But at that point, they were the only young people really in the church. But he believed in them, and nobody had ever trusted them with any kind of leadership before.
Wow.
So when I came in, they were already there to be leaders with me, to help me carry the torch.
Wow.
And so that was it. I think celebration and multiplication and innovation, I think those things helped it kind of spark.
Right.
There are a lot of things. Of course, you want to, every church, it needs to be based in prayer and holiness and scripture. And so when I speak about these other things, that's just programmatic wise.
Right.
But the real essence is that stuff, of course. But what made us, maybe our church, a little bit different, and made people that weren't Christian people say, "What is that?" And check it out, was some of the creative, innovative things. It's kind of funny because now what we did that was really creative and innovative, everybody's doing
That's
it.
Right. That's right.
So like we were the first church anywhere around the whole region to do like guitars and drums and stuff like that.
Wow.
Nobody ever heard of that. They thought church had a pipe organ, and now everybody's doing that. I think maybe to be innovative, we should bring in a pipe organ.
Right. That's right.
or something. Yeah, I don't know. But at that point, and small groups was another thing.
Wow.
We found that small groups didn't really draw people to the church, but it kept people there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so kind of like a connectivity kind of thing.
Right.
So we tried to make it like that every Sunday was special in some way. Don't do the same thing. Do something new, something that would make people think they're going to miss something if they didn't come to church.
I've been the first church I was at started a contemporary service on the campus of Southern Wesleyan University, and I actually remember when it first got going, they were doing just videos every week. Sometimes it had to do with the message, and sometimes it didn't. And one of my good friends was doing these videos, and I'm telling you, if I missed the video, I felt like I was so angry with myself, because a lot of times, Sunday mornings you're doing different things, but I just made sure, because I didn't want to miss it. Yeah. And there was just this excitement about being there, and I know, in my church, that's what we're trying to do. That same thing is, we're trying to do something that people are like, well, what a crazy thing are these guys going to do this week? Now, you guys have been involved, you said, in daughtering a church, but also in helping some other local churches revitalize. Tell me, how has God used you in that whole process, and how has that impacted your church?
Well, as our church grew over the years, it became more regional in reach.
Right.
And that's what happens in a small community. Only 2,100 people live in Hayward, so I got to fish in deeper waters than that.
Right.
But there are lots of people, within a half-hour driving distance, and a lot of people drive, a half-hour to come to church, or even more than that, some even an hour to come to church. But there were people coming from this little community, Minon was the name of it, and they loved our church, they really did. But we had heard that there was a church building that was empty sitting there, and there were only two other churches in town. There was a Catholic church and a Lutheran church.
Wow.
And no evangelical presence.
Wow.
Well, we were the closest, and we were a half hour away.
Yeah.
And so I met with that small group in that empty church building. They wondered what I was up to.
Yeah.
So I just went out and said, guys, maybe we should do something. I mean, here is an empty church building. You guys are from this town. You love Jesus. Maybe we should do something. They didn't want to do it. They weren't enthused about that at all.
Right.
They loved our church.
Yeah.
But then they went home and they thought about it. And the next time they met, one by one, they went around the circle. They were at a bonfire around the circle. They're all saying, you know what? Even though I love Hayward and I'm willing to take the drive, my neighbors won't.
Wow.
And
wow.
Even though I love this church, I love my neighbor, and I think my neighbor needs to know Jesus.
Wow.
So they did it not for themselves, but for their neighbors.
Wow.
So we started a Saturday night service then, and I would go out and preach on Saturday nights and send some staff people sometimes, and my little girl Hannah would go with me, and then we found a pastor, Ben Kidder, wonderful guy, just on fire for God, and he took it off. He took it over, and it just really took off from there. The day we installed Ben, Hannah and I, we were driving back home. This was our last time then, because we handed the reins over to him.
Right.
She goes, "Daddy, is there another little town we can start a church in?"
That's awesome.
I know. I was like, yeah.
That is awesome.
So we had that one, and then there are a couple of others as well. There's a little Wesleyan church up in the woods, another half hour from that one, just like another half hour farther out, an hour from Hayward.
Right. It's
on the same highway, Highway 77.
Wow.
And there's a lady in our church who gave her heart to Christ and just grew in the Lord. I've just watched her faith develop gloriously, and God called her into ministry, and about a year ago she was installed as the pastor of that church.
Man, that's just amazing.
Yeah, the church is growing, and then on the other direction, about 15 miles on the same road, Highway 77, headed to heaven, it's like everyone, right there, like little beads on a pearl,
right.
Pearl beads on a necklace. I mean, this church called Spider Lake Church, they'd gone through some terrible kinds of situations. There was some really difficult things that happened there,
right.
With liberal theology and just stuff along that line, the homosexual issue. But what happened was they ended up being pastorless.
Right.
And they didn't know what to do, and they called us, and we had a guy in the wings that we thought, hey, you know what, maybe he'd be good for it. And we sent him out, and man, that church is just alive, and the Spirit of God's there, and church is growing. So it's just to see many little points of light, that fills my heart all the way up. There's another ministry going on. They don't meet on Sundays, they meet on Tuesdays. Well, and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, but it's on the reservation, the Native American reservation, which is about 6 miles from where we live. And they have a little garage that they turned into a ministry outreach center. It's called the Shack, and so they converted this garage into this hangout place with pool table, foosball, and stuff like that, and they have this missional community that's there. They did a really cool thing about 2 weeks ago. It was just called The Giveaway.
Yeah.
And what they did was they asked people from our church if they just had any good stuff that they weren't using, no junk.
Right.
And so all these people brought a whole bunch of good stuff.
Yeah.
And they took it to the Shack and just put it out there. And then they put the word out, and just said, anybody who wants to have free stuff, come get it. and it was just amazing. Like within 2 hours, everything was gone.
Right.
And in the Native American context, gifting is such an important part of friendship.
Yes.
And so that spoke really deeply to the tribe. It was just really a good thing.